My name is Martin. I was already at the edge, contemplating leaving my marriage long before it ultimately unraveled. For a time, I was in a marriage that felt more like a slow decline than a shared life. I realized it was time to leave during a family barbecue when I was ridiculed. That night, once everyone departed and the house fell silent, I vanished. My wife Julie and I had been married for over 8 years. Initially, we were like most couples, but deeply connected. We had aspirations. We didn't just want a house, we desired a home. That was the dream we agreed upon. For a while we pursued it together. However, around year 5, things began to change. It wasn't abrupt, which made it harder to notice. The turning point occurred when we started trying for children. We both wanted them desperately. But as months turned into years without success, we resorted to fertility clinics, appointments, injections, tests, and schedules. We followed every suggestion. Each month brought new hope, and each ended with a quiet disappointment that filled the air like smoke. I witnessed the toll it took on Julie. She became more reserved and withdrawn. Initially, I assumed it was just stress. We were both suffering. But at some point, she ceased trying altogether, not only with the treatments, but also with me. She abandoned the dream. I believe when it became too painful to hold on to, she simply let it go. With that, it felt as if she released our marriage. As well, the affection that once flowed easily faded, replaced by a cold, polite distance. We continued to share the same house, sleep in the same bed, and eat at the same table, yet it felt as if I was cohabitating with a stranger. And the silence between us grew heavier each day. What hurt most was her apparent lack of notice or concern. She had emotionally shut down. I told myself love meant holding on, even when the other person had let go. So, about a year and some months before everything finally fell apart with Julie, her sister arrived at our door. She had just experienced a terrible breakup with her husband. I'm talking full-blown shouting matches, cheating allegations, and even police visits to their home multiple times. It was a disaster, and understandably, she needed a break. Julie approached me asking if her sister could stay with us for a few days until she sorted things out. Naturally, I agreed. It was the right thing to do. She had 2 little kids who didn't ask for any of this. They arrived with a few bags, seemingly for an overnight stay, but a few days quickly turned into weeks. I thought perhaps she needed a little extra time to figure out her next steps, yet those days morphed into weeks, and she never mentioned finding work, securing her own place, or even returning to her previous town. Her belongings began to overtake our guest room. The kids' toys cluttered everywhere. Living room, kitchen, even our bedroom at times. Their clothes mixed with our laundry. Still, I remained silent. But then a few weeks turned into a month. Then 2. Before I realized it, we were deep into the 3rd month, and she was still living with us. I felt like I had another family residing under my roof, and no one else seemed to view it as a problem except me. My wife's sister was loud and sarcastic, always had a quip ready, and the kids were pure chaos. There was no discipline, no respect for boundaries, no sense of order. It felt like living in a daycare run by a drunken clown. Every day was filled with tension. I'd return home from work exhausted, hoping for a moment of peace, only to be greeted by yet another mess. Arguments became routine. There was no more conversation, just conflict. What hurt most was that Julie always sided with her sister. Always. Regardless of how her sister acted, Julie would defend her. I'd express my concerns calmly, only to be dismissed. She made excuses like, "She's my only sister," or "You can't expect me to throw her out just because of one thing you dislike." To Julie, my frustration was invalid. There was one instance that stuck with me. Her sister was mocking me, throwing jabs, and instead of stopping it, Julie joined in with a smirk, saying, "Oh, come on, he's sensitive." They both laughed. I felt humiliated. It reached a point where I wasn't even sleeping in my own bed. Julie allowed her sister and the kids to sleep in our bedroom, leaving me to find a spot wherever I could. Now, I know some might hear this and think, why didn't you just leave? Trust me, I questioned that too, but it wasn't that simple. I believed a significant part of what Julie was experiencing stemmed from our inability to have children. It crushed her. I thought if we could navigate through that and find a way forward together, our love could be rekindled. So I stayed longer than I should have, clinging to the belief that our marriage still had potential. But deep down, I was growing weary. One day I reached the point where love alone wasn't enough to keep me anchored in a house where I felt like a stranger. Thus, I arranged a discreet consultation with a divorce lawyer. I shared the facts. Weeks after that meeting, the divorce papers were prepared and ready, yet I couldn't bring myself to serve them, not because I expected her to change, but because a part of me still longed for her to look at me the way she used to, even if just once more. However, as I waited, the tension didn't lessen. I made a mental to-do list and began checking things off one by one. The first step was to quietly pack some essentials clothes, documents, sentimental items, and store them in old moving boxers. I labeled them vaguely in case anyone stumbled upon them. Next, I rented a small storage unit outside of town, paying in cash. It was a place no one would think to search. I started gradually moving boxes there, a few at a time. I opened a new bank account under a different name variation. I purchased a new phone, even selected a new city, somewhere smaller and quieter. I meticulously planned everything down to the hour. If my marriage were to end, I was prepared to vanish like a ghost. But I didn't take action because, despite everything, I still loved her. Somewhere deep within me, beneath all the hurt and exhaustion, I was still clinging to the woman I married. One Saturday, I stepped out to clear my head for a few hours. Upon returning to my driveway, I noticed more cars than usual lining the street. Laughter echoed from the backyard. I could hear kids yelling and playing before even opening the front door. I entered and followed the sounds. The backyard was buzzing. Children darted around with juice boxes in hand. Someone was grilling burgers. The music played softly but steadily. Everyone appeared engrossed in conversation or sharing jokes. Drinks were scattered on the patio table, and paper plates were piled high with food, the whole 9 yards. It was a full-blown family barbecue. The only issue? I had no idea about it. I paused at the door, taking it all in for a moment. It felt like stepping into someone else's party at my own home. I kept my expression neutral.
Nice.
I spotted my wife, Julie, laughing with her parents near the patio table. Before I could speak, one of Julie's aunts noticed me and waved me over. "Martin, come grab this for me real quick," she called. I nodded and made my way across the yard. I've never had any issues with the extended family. Honestly, I often got along better with some of them than with Julie herself these days. So, I forced a smile and went to help. As I handed over the tray she needed, another relative leaned in with a curious smile, asking, "Hey, where have you been all day? We've been here for hours. Didn't you know we were coming?" And just like that, it clicked. I was excluded. I barely opened my mouth to respond when my sister-in-law cut through the chatter, her voice loud enough to say, "You know, if Martin disappeared tomorrow, I don't think anyone would even notice." Everyone erupted in laughter. To top it off, her sister added, "I didn't even know you weren't around." It was meant as a joke, sure, but not to me. So, I raised my hot dog like it was a glass of wine, offered a half smile, and said, "Challenge accepted." After that, nobody said anything. A few people glanced my way, probably thinking I was joking too, but I wasn't. That was the moment I decided. I was done being invisible in my own life. By the time the barbecue finally wound down and most guests had left, the house still buzzed. Faintly. That night, I had already been contemplating leaving my marriage. With what had been said to me today, I knew I wouldn't wait for things to worsen. I didn't need much, just the essentials. A few clothes, my laptop, important documents, and cash in a duffel bag, before stepping out the door. I left a copy of the signed divorce papers right in the middle of the kitchen counter, where she'd have to see them in the morning, topped with a yellow sticky note that read, "You noticed yet?" Then I walked out, locked the door behind me, got into my car, and drove away. That same night, I deleted every social media account linked to my name: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all gone. Then I pulled out my old prepaid phone, swapped out the SIM card, and tossed the original into a storm drain at a gas station 2 towns over. I didn't want to be found by her or anyone else. I just couldn't keep hurting myself by staying. I drove to a small cabin I had noticed earlier on an obscure, classified site. Owned by a retired man who didn't ask too many questions, I paid 3 months' rent up front in cash. It was deep enough in the woods to feel forgotten by the world, yet close enough to a town for groceries when needed. I made a living doing small freelance gigs online, earning just enough to cover food, electricity, and basic necessities. The days blended together. There was no schedule or pressure. I woke up to the sound of birds. Weeks turned into months. My beard grew out. I began eating better, sleeping deeper, and thinking clearly. Not once did I check on Julie because I finally understood I didn't need to. That chapter was closed. No good ever comes from reopening a wound just to see if it still bleeds. 8 months after I left, I decided to check one of my old email accounts for a personal file I had backed up years ago. It was an account I hadn't logged into since before I disappeared. I wasn't expecting anything. The moment I opened the inbox, I froze. There were dozens of emails, all from Julie. At first, I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to delete them. I hovered over the delete button several times, but eventually, I clicked. The earliest emails were filled with anger. She demanded to know where I had gone, calling me selfish, a coward, and heartless. She accused me of abandoning her, claiming I had no right to just vanish. Her words were harsh, but as I read through the emails chronologically, the tone shifted. Her words began to soften. There were still questions, but they lacked the rage. They felt uncertain and hesitant, as if she was beginning to hear her own voice in the silence I left behind. Ow! The most recent emails struck me differently. I remember staring at one in particular. She mentioned that the bank had started sending warnings, something about missed payments and potential foreclosure. She confessed she was now working 2 jobs to keep the house afloat, and that she had to send her sister and the kids away. They weren't helping, she wrote, as if she finally understood what I had been trying to explain for years. In one message, she said, "I get it now. I understand why you were so distant. I just wish I hadn't been so blind." Another read, "I wish you'd come home. Not because I need help, but because I miss you. Because I finally see what you sacrificed, trying to hold everything together." Then came the email that took the breath out of me. She wrote, "I was foolish. I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be around, no matter how much I ignored you. I still haven't signed the divorce papers. Keep hoping one day you'll walk through the door." Sat there staring at that screen. I won't lie. I felt something. My chest ached reading those words. I knew that side of Hertha, side capable of deep love, the side that wanted to build something with me once. Maybe this was that version of her finally breaking through the noise. But feelings aren't always enough. For years, I stayed in that house, convincing myself love would fix things, that time would heal. Yet now, even reading those emails, as emotional as they were, I didn't know if I could ever return to that life. By this point, it had been exactly a year since I disappeared, an entire year of living off the grid, severing ties and finally breathing freely for the first time. In ages, I only ventured into town every couple of weeks for supplies. One day I stopped by a little coffee shop I had come to enjoy tucked away on the city's edge. I walked in, ordered my usual, and was waiting at the pickup counter when I heard someone call my name. At first, I ignored it. But when it came again firmer, more surprised, I turned around. It was Ryan, an old mutual friend. His eyes widened as if he'd seen a ghost, which in a way, he had. We exchanged awkward small talk. I kept it brief. Revealing little, less than a week later, there was a knock at my cabin door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the curtain, and there she was, Julie. For a moment I hesitated. I opened the door slowly, maintaining a flat expression. "What do you want?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just broke down sobbing. She kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't realize it had gotten that bad, that she wished she'd listened more and understood sooner. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. When she finished, I stepped outside with her, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, "I'll come back. but only to end this properly. I'll sign whatever needs. Signing. We'll conclude this like adults. But I can't be your husband again, not after everything. Not after what your sister put me through. Not after you stood by and allowed it. She didn't argue. There was no fight left in her, just a slow nod. She wiped her face, tried to smile, but couldn't. With that, she left. Upon reflecting on everything, it's strange how people only begin to appreciate something or someone once it's gone. That's one of life's hardest lessons. Sadly, it's a lesson I had to learn through experience. For years, I remained in a marriage that was evidently deteriorating. What nobody tells you is that love can't thrive when one person is invested while the other has emotionally checked out. I endured constant disrespect, belittlement, and chaos brought on by my sister-in-law and her kids because I loved Julie. I became invisible in my own home. Yet, the bizarre thing is, it all started making sense to her only after I vanished. That's when she recognized what I had been trying to express all along. Perhaps that's what some individuals require, the absence of something they always assumed would remain. So, if you're listening to this and find yourself in a situation where your presence is taken for granted, I hope my story prompts some reflection. Don't wait until you're broken to prove you were whole. And if you're someone who has been pushing someone away, ask yourself why it takes their absence for you to finally recognize their value. I genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave a comment. Share your own experiences, whether similar or not, and tell me what you think. If you know someone who might need to hear this story today, please share it with them. You never know who might be quietly sitting with their bags packed, just waiting for one more reason to disappear. Thank you for being here.